sure if I should introduce myself. In this crowd, I probably are a known person. But if not yet, this is kind of what I contributed to over the last years. And I want to talk today about an idea. Okay. Okay. Does it work? Should I turn it on or so? Yeah, about a refundable ICO. And so we kind of like seen in the last years, especially the last year, all of these ICOs, right? Probably due to the fall of the ERC20 token as well, but so kind of like we figured how we can automatically collect money, and that's really the real reason why it took off so much, is that you can not only have your own token the way it works and the way you want it to work, but also you can have this automated process because you have smart contracts which can interact with each other. And that's great, and a lot of money was collected during that time, and still is. And now kind of we have to focus on how we want to do this in a more sustainable way, of how we want to do this that is not only like collecting money and then the team figures out what to do with it, but how there's some kind of feedback loop between the investors and the project creators and founders. Okay. It's the other way around, okay. So yeah, a token, I mean, probably most of you know, but the token is, on Ethereum especially, is nothing else than a smart contract holding account balances. There's probably a lot of confusion in the blockchain space of what are like native cryptocurrencies and what are other kind of asset tokens, and like what are ERC20 tokens, which is kind of the synonym of the token standard as of now. So it's just a list of account balances in one smart contract, and you can simply tell the smart contract to give that money to somebody else, and it just transfers internally the accounts to another person. So an ICO is exactly the same, using these smart contracts, but it nicely automates the process. So you give one smart contract money, and it releases you tokens in return. The problem right now is, as I described, is money is collected. That's kind of the point where all the money goes to the founders. Most of the time today, this is going to a multi-signature wallet. And then it sits there and is spent over time on the project, somewhat successful, sometimes less successful. And sometimes the money grows over time as well, and then there's even more money than was initially collected, and then these projects have to think about, okay, now what to do, what else to fund with that, and then that's all great. But it also led to a lot of scam projects in the last, especially in my opinion, in the last few months. It's like kind of growing ICOs for either applications tokens where it's like rather questionable what is their value, or for projects which are actually outright scams. So making a fair ICO, I think, is something we can actually easily program. And today I'm showing one example what that could be. So kind of this is the current situation, right? Like we just get it on and we're all happy. So Vitalik came up with an interesting idea called the DICO or DAO ICO. And I will quickly explain that and then go to my idea, which is rather similar, as I figured out later. But the idea here is kind of that you collect the money, but it's going basically on a tap per second. It goes basically over time to the token holders. And the participants in the ICO have an ability to like stop that like dispersion of money to the project. So it's given over time. And the contributors have the ability to raise that tap, so to raise the speed the money is given to the ICO project. For example, if they succeed, if they see it succeeds and it's very successful, but there should be more money in it to do certain things faster, they just raise the tap. Or if they see the project is a failure or it's a scam, for example, or whatever internal struggles happen that the project most likely will not succeed, they could vote on putting it into some kind of withdraw mode and withdraw them funds. And that's actually a very good way of how you could do that. And it kind of solves a few of these problems. In this case, I think the main issue here is that if a 51% attack happens and they want to cancel the ICO, the developer could make another ICO, but it's kind of like a lot of work, right? And but yeah, it kind of prevents against these these differences. The idea of the refundable ICO, and I call it a Tesla semi-truck ICO because it looks very much like it. But it's very similar, but a bit simpler. It doesn't necessarily work for all current projects. And we are actually planning to use this in the project I'm doing now, which is a blockchain for the fashion and design industry. So it's a separate blockchain. I would like to actually use that model. I still have to figure out if we can do that and what kind of legal stretching this involves and so on, which kind of takes the fun out of the whole thing in a bit. But it's kind of the same idea. So instead of giving the funds directly, you give the funds over time, so-called on a tap per second, and each individual at all times can basically get his money out of the fund again. So basically everybody can personally decide if he still believes in the project or if he doesn't anymore. And if he for example, doesn't believe in the project anymore, he could simply call the withdraw and stop the whole thing. And get whatever money he still has on his side for himself. So there are 3 phases. There's an allocation phase, which is obviously, you know, the mostly it's like some 20 days or so of people contribute to the ICO. There's a time where the money then gets distributed to the project, and let's say, for example, that's 2 years. Then this is a reasonable long amount of time that people can see, does the project will work out, you know, are they doing what they're supposed to do, and there's some kind of decision-making phase long enough that you don't lose all your money in a way like in 1 or 2 months. And then there's the idea of the possible refund. And as it would work here is kind of, you would just send the tokens back, and this obviously requires a token standard like 777, which allows to notify the smart contract that it now received the tokens. And then it would give you back whatever percentage you still have free in the ether or available in the ether, and would lock the other balance. So one thing would you create multiple tokens, but that's complicated, right? If you split your tokens in different types, that can get complicated. But what you can do is you can actually lock a part of the balance. Then you can actually still interact with this token with every wallet existing, just some balance parts you can't move until a potential swap in the future. And the last phase, in this case, and for example in our case, if we start the Luxor network, would be the swap to the native token. So this ICO is obviously not for every kind of, especially for these kind of app tokens we see on Ethereum. I mean, it could be made possible too, but ideally it works for when there's some kind of like swap phase or linking phase at some point where that pre-token gets swapped to the actual native token, for example, in this case. So these 3 phases is kind of like, the first one is just allocating, where I could always refund 100%. So imagine I go to the website, and in the past we had the issue that people want to invest in an ICO. They rather don't even read across the website, they just like invest immediately, and we kind of had these races going on. In this case, you could simply see, okay, I didn't really read, and actually that's different than I thought, and you could just refund at all times in the allocation phase. And then you have this distribution phase, let's say it's 2 years, and in this distribution phase, you could actually refund whatever is still on your side. And on the end, you end up with a part of the tokens or a part with the refundable tokens, like as a locked balance, and the other one is a not locked balance. And you can at some point, even with the locked balance, then swap against the native token. So this kind of looks then, like a Tesla semi-truck. So let's say you have a pre-ICO in your public ICO. The important thing here is that you would have to have exactly the same ratio for everybody participating in the allocation phase, or and exactly the same refund. If you make any kind of different ratios, for example, let's say the people in the pre-ICO get 50% more or so, then these 50% would have been locked balance since the beginning. So the only thing they can do is with that 50% they got extra, they swap it against the native token on the end. But I could not refund that because obviously that would take more out of the pot than there was ever being put in, right? So in this way, for example, if I decide after 1 year, yeah, I don't believe in the project anymore, or whatever happens, the ether price goes higher than the project's potential or whatever, I could withdraw my money, still get 50% of my ether out, lock the other 50% of the token, so I actually still participate in the project success if it actually launches at some point, and I have less of a risk I'm taking, and I could be part of it. The other part is that the tokens you give back, they could be actually for sale again. So somebody else could come and say, okay, now I still believe in the project, and actually I'm now buying these tokens. There's still like the question here, if they should be lockable or not, because obviously this has to be calculated outright so that there's never more to be able to take out of the pot than there actually is inside. But this is kind of like a good model to disperse the trust on either side. And for example, if you have tokens going to the founders or tokens going to lawyers and advisors and so on, these tokens would be locked at all times until the actual project starts. So the founders token itself have basically no value because they can't trade them until the actual project starts, because otherwise they would be able to withdraw money they actually never put in. So in my opinion, this nicely aligns the incentives of the founders to make the project a success and the investors to kind of support the project over time until the point when the project actually can like start and get successful. And if this could be any time during that 2 years, there could be the swap process. So people could say, okay, now the project started or whatever functionality is available, and we want to make it now accessible, then you simply swap. And when people swap, obviously they have no possibility to refund anymore because they don't have that pre-token which they bought in the ICO. So it would still be the same process, the money would still go over time to the project, but they have more security because nobody will refund, or a big chunk of people will not refund anymore. That's the basic idea, and I think I have quite some time still left, right? So if we want to have a discussion about that, then feel free. Come on. No, the ratio of the refund will be 1-to-1. Let's say if it's 1-to-1, right? €1 or whatever it is. Or it's a fixed ratio. It will be the same ratio as in the public ICO, and this has to be ideally equal for everybody. And the 0.5, the 0.5 he got extra in the pre-ICO, that's basically locked balance. So if you, it would be kind of like, probably like this. So this would be his 0.5, and this would be his 1. So this is what he could send back to the smart contract to refund, and this is something he can only swap once the project actually starts. Because otherwise he could obviously refund more than he ever put in, which would be a problem, right? Yeah. To prevent the refund, to actually prevent multiple refunds. I mean, it's his decision, you know. If he doesn't want to have it locked up, he doesn't refund. But if he refunds the other part, he still keeps, has to be locked, because otherwise, or for example, in this case, the pre-ICO people, it has to be locked because otherwise they could refund as well. And they could refund money they never put in, right? And if you believe in the, I mean, once the project actually starts or the token functionality becomes available or whatever, and there's some kind of swap process, exactly in that point, you have whatever you were expecting. Yeah, you, okay. Maybe I should repeat the questions then? Yeah. I mean, could an attacker kind of like buy a lot of tokens and then refund a lot of tokens to destroy the project, I guess? Sure, he could do that. The question would be, what is his benefit to do that? Because it just is like work for him. But yeah, I mean, it could be potentially an issue. But on the other hand, if the tokens are rebuyable, then somebody else would jump in and buy them. So I mean, for example, it's kind of like the ICO is not over for 2 years, and you could like reload the contribution page, always looking if there's now tokens available again to buy. True. If you have that money available, then sure. But maybe you don't need then to make an ICO in the first place. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely ways of how you could probably game it. And actually, I mean, it's just an idea and thinking about something, because I would like to bring more fairness into the whole space and kind of like gives this feedback loop between the founders and the investors. And obviously, we have to see if this works out. I mean, this is kind of like when we started the blockchain and used Bitcoin and Ethereum back then. I mean, it was unclear if that whole game will work, you know, like the miners and users and gas price and so on. And so far, it like holds up pretty well. That could just work perfectly. Also couldn't, right? And you could game it. I mean, there's also ways of how you can attack the network. And we had spam attacks and all of these things. They just figured that it doesn't make much sense at some point. Or there was just waste. Maybe they didn't short enough and paid more on the network, so. Could you repeat that again? Because the bonus is locked. It's to they own the locked balance, but they refund everything they contribute. They could do that, yeah. That's true. But I mean, in the private pre-sales, it's most of the time people you know and people you select. That's the kind of like, it's kind of to secure money and also people you choose. So would be probably an asshole you chose then. But but I mean, yeah, could be possible. So I mean, if the token would be tradable, right? Then the nice thing is it kind of creates a base price. So it creates this minimum of what you can still take out of the contract as a base price, which actually could even increase the token price a lot over time, because there's the base price and then there's the speculation of what it will be more worth than actually the ether being put in. And I mean, that's exactly what I would like to see this playing out and see how it works out. And concerning the risk with the pre-sale, I mean, it could be one-to-one also for the pre-sale, and you just say, okay, it's just your secure spot in the ICO. So the nice thing about this, and that's like different to the DICO. In the DICO, you need a consensus with a lot of people, and you need specific interfaces. The beauty of this is the only thing you actually need is a wallet which can receive tokens and send tokens. For example, if you use ERC-777, and will hear a talk from Jordi after that, the ICO contract will know when he received the tokens, and he could immediately initiate a refund. So the only thing you need to do is having a wallet which is able to receive ERC-20-like tokens and send them out. And you just send your tokens back to the ICO contract, and it gives you immediately the refund. So it doesn't require any additional interfaces, which is kind of what also makes it rather easy to interact with. So the exchange rate of the refund has to be exactly the same ratio, and it has to obviously be in the currency you put in this case Ether on the Ethereum blockchain. Yeah, it's exactly the same ratio like you put money in. Because if you make a different ratio, I mean, you probably could think about that as well. I mean, there could be all kind of variations of that, but then you have to do a lot of calculation and make sure that on the end, people can't take out more than they put in. Sure, if you count it in dollar terms, it will be different, sure. You could also use it as a savings wallet with slight decrease, and maybe increase in dollar terms. I mean, that's kind of the risk, and here you take less risk, but this is technically the risk you're taking investing in any ICO. I mean, there's some projects I participated in. If I would just have kept the Ether, that might be a better idea by now. But still, to be determined, right? I mean, this is kind of the risk you take by investing with Ether or any other cryptocurrencies. But in this case, you could just, if, for example, if you see the Ether price goes up and you want to get your Ether out because you believe they are more worth than the actual tokens, that will be a problem for the project. But at the same time, the Ether which will still stay in the project for the project are also went up in value. So probably in dollar terms, the project will still end up with the very similar amount of tokens. And if it shows success, these tokens, which are again available, will be probably bought as well. So this is exactly the thing what we probably would have to see then over time, how well and how good it works out. Obviously, everything in the cryptocurrency space is somehow dependent on the Ether price going up or down. I mean, like if the Ether price goes now super down and everything, then projects will have less money available in any case, generic across the whole network. But it could actually play really well out for actually the project's funding, even if money goes out and later comes in again, or even if it stays out. It could be the same amount of dollar available. Okay. Could you speak a little louder? Yeah. So the question is like the risk you take by participating in like by making a refundable ICO. Yeah, I mean, it's very similar. I mean, in the DICO, if people vote to put the project at a halt, then the money immediately at this point is not available anymore. for the project, and it would be refundable. In this concept, it's everybody's own choice, right? I mean, it could be, obviously, if there is like a FUD moment and people like panic, they could go out. But again, you know, this could also recover because people can go in again. So it's hard to say if this is more risky or less risky, but it gives definitely greater choice to the individual, in my opinion. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, you could always make your token, you know, you could always have a Boolean in your token which just prevents it moving at all, and say, hey, we lift this at some point or we don't. In this case, what I also like is that the founder's token itself has no value until the actual promise is fulfilled. And this is actually not because maybe it's wanted, but it's technically necessary, which is also a nice component. I don't fully understand the question, but I guess it's about how the refund works and how to make. So in the DICO refund, you put it in a withdraw state and people withdraw their money. In this model, you simply send back your tokens and it starts to refund right in that moment. So basically you get exactly the part app you still hold, but you have to send 100% of your tokens. If you, for example, want to get the full refund possible at this time, you would have to send 100% of your tokens, and it would only take half and lock the other half. You can also only choose to refund a part of the tokens, then it would like for example, after 1 year, it would lock then, like of whatever token amount you send, 50% of the token it would lock, and 50% of what the ether would be worth you get back. So it's up to you, whatever and how much you refund and when. So the power is actually with every investor separate, and it's a withdraw, so nobody needs to take care of any kind of refunding except each person themselves. I'm not sure what my time is. Yeah, no more questions. So, I mean, what I would like to see is these kind of ideas to be discussed, to really like figure out what are good models of how we can have the aftermath of an ICO done in a safe and a more fair way, and a more in a way like that there's some kind of feedback loop and not like just penis on the website. So I have not put that online yet, but anybody can put it online. Maybe I put that. I'm not sure if this should be discussed in an ERC or so. I think probably just Reddit is fine already, I guess, or maybe in ERC. I don't know. And you had just one last question then? Okay. So your idea is about like creating milestones and then refund. I mean, this is kind of what the DICO does, right? So the idea is that there are milestones. If they're not hit, then people can refund. The problem I see here is with the DICO that we've seen already with the DAO, like getting a bunch of people to vote is rather complicated in a decentralized system. Ah, okay, only doing some kind of like milestone evaluation phase. That's an interesting one, yeah, could work. Only refunding in certain time frames could be a good idea. Okay, I think that's, okay, one last one, okay. Yeah. It probably is more generalizable. I mean, the obvious one, I mean, this is what we would like to do, is like swapping it for a native network token at some point, which obviously has some kind of regulations of how you could frame it. Is this a pre-sale of a software license? Is this like a security, which is obviously right now the big thing here. To be determined, I guess. You could also make it not transferable, and then maybe the security is less of a problem. But yeah, it could technically also be swapped for some kind of native app token, utility token, protocol token, whatever other system too. I mean, yeah. Thank you so much.